Ever wonder why so many companies have such trouble executing upon their annual business plan and their strategic initiatives? Is there a better way to implement and get things done within a company? There's got to be. Do you think culture programs actually help companies implement and be more productive? No way. So we'll take a look at this and more on this episode of Work Trauma, How Corporations Really Work, with a special guest who's an expert in execution.
Off with his head!
No, not that kind of execution. In business execution, and is the author of the book, 4 Disciplines of Execution, Chris McChesney. Let's get started. Hello, I'm Michael Denisoff, CEO and Principal Director of the Denisoff Consulting Group, an international consulting firm dedicated to elevating organizations to help them perform better, be more successful, and grow strong, high-performing cultures. And this is possible, but only if we are really honest about how corporations work. And welcome to this episode of Work Trauma, How Corporations Really Work podcast, where we pull back the curtain to let you know what is really going on at companies so you can make a decision about who you work for, how to navigate your career, and if you are a leader, how to build better, fairer, and more successful organizations. On this episode, we're with Chris McChesney, so join us for part 1 of this conversation. All right, everybody, welcome to the Work Trauma, How Companies Really Work podcast with our special guest, Chris McChesney. Yay! I'm so excited about this for a variety of reasons. One of them would be Chris is doing amazing work in the world within organizations to help them be more effective and run better, which is really at the heart of what we want to do with the Work Trauma podcast. Also, I've known Chris McChesney for many, many years since we were kids. I still remember the first moment I met him and saw them. And we were just saying that although a lot of things have changed, we've done a lot of things in life, we have families and stuff, we're still the kind of same young kids at heart. So I'm excited to talk to you about
We were literally 4th graders. And it was in his backyard playing football.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Actually, the last time we made a video like this, it was prom night in the back of a limousine with a couple of dates, and that might not be the last one, but that's the last video I have that you and I made.
That's true. That's true. I know we did that. We used to have the Mike and Chris show. That's for sure.
Right.
Excellent. Well, let me tell you guys about Chris. Chris McChesney is the lead author of the best-selling book in the world on strategy execution called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. And if you haven't read this book, you really need to do so. It really does what needs to be done for execution. And we're going to talk a lot about that, what that means. It's not only good for the business, obviously, when you execute well, it's good for the engagement of the employees. It's healthy for the employees. For over 20 years, Chris has been the global practice leader of execution for Franklin Covey and has led Franklin Covey's ongoing design and development of these principles, as well as the consulting organization that has achieved extraordinary growth in many countries around the globe and impacted thousands of organizations. So what I know about Chris, he's a highly sought after speaker and consultant, super dynamic when he's on the stage and off the stage as well. And just not only is his materially just great and impactful, his level of caring for organizations and making sure that this stuff works and helps the organization is tremendous. So when we look at some of the folks he's consulted to, we look at the state of Georgia, Marriott International, Shaw Industries, the Ritz-Carlton, Kroger, Coca-Cola, Comcast, Frito-Lay, Lockheed Martin, and Gaylord Entertainment, amongst many others. But every time I look for Chris, a lot of times he'll be like, I'm sorry, I'm in Taiwan at the moment, or I'm sorry, I'm in Scotland at the moment. So he's always on the road taking care of changing the world. So Chris, welcome.
This is how your oldest friend introduces you, everyone. So please take that, lower your expectations and take that with a grain of salt.
No, I'm super excited about this, again, because no, Chris, he's just a high, one of the best people I know and ever met. So I'm really excited about that. A man, I gladly lick the soles of his shoes. He's really great. So, all right, Chris. So let's get into it. But before we get into it, let's talk a little bit about 4DX. It's a cool way to say it, right? The 4 disciplines of execution. And a little bit maybe about how that came about. Like what got you there? I know you were working at Covey. We were both there for a time, working with the 7 habits of highly effective people, a lot of different things. But how'd you get to the 4DX?
The issue that really rose from doing a lot of interviews with executives because of the 7 habits and the culture work that they wanted to do, I started to notice that there was a real common issue that leaders had around translating their strategic agenda to anything that actually happened at the front line of the organization. There was this sort of general frustration that the gears and the levers that I've got hold of aren't really connected to anything. And it showed up in different ways, and people use different language. And then Ram Charan, who with Larry Bossidy wrote a book called Execution.
Of course, I remember that, yeah.
Right. And also What the CEO Wants You to Know. He was a good friend of our CEOs, and he started pushing this issue of execution. And when I heard that word, I was like, yeah, this is the thing. This is the thing everyone's talking about. And so that was about 25 years ago. And as we got into this field, the more we got into it, the more we recognized, well, think of it this way, Michael. If you go to business school, you don't study execution, you study strategy. But if you talk to leaders about what they're most frustrated with, they don't say strategy, they say execution. So there was this mismatch in the field of leadership development. And as we got into it, it quickly morphed into not just executing and getting business done, but specifically, how do you execute a plan that requires a change in human behavior or a high degree of human engagement? And that always seems to be the crux of the problem. There's lots of things that the organization can say and then make good on. But as soon as you run into that behavioral issue, that started to become, the real crux of all this work. And so 4,000 implementations later, 20 years, 2 decades, a lot of trial and error on this. This work sort of evolved, and it's got really interesting implications around the impact, like you said, that work has on engagement. So that's my quick summation, at least of the intent behind this work.
It's brilliant. It's so funny. I never thought about this before. I remember it was like the early 2000s. There was this really weird shift to a focus on strategy, right? Like everybody wanted to be strategic thinker. It was kind of sexy and cool. Yep. And, frontline supervisors like, I'm being strategic. I'm like, well, who's doing the work? And everything being strategy. Strategy was cool. Visionaries and all this. And stuff wasn't getting done. It's always been
cool, but it really had its sort of a heyday. Yeah. Yep. And I think the pendulum sort of swung back a little bit.
Yeah. That's amazing. And then tell us a little bit about how did you test this? And so you kind of recognize this need. It's coming up more and more. How did you do that trial and error? How did you kind of get, because right now the stuff is really tight. I mean, you got it nailed down pretty dang good. Tell us how you got there.
Yeah. And there was huge variation at the beginning, like you'd expect, and then smaller sort of refinement over time. The original, I didn't give birth to this thing. I raised it. But it was birthed by a different person. The gentleman's name was Jim Stewart. If you've ever seen Landman, that new series, that's him. Okay, so he actually started work at Conoco in the oil fields, and he was a little guy, just like Billy Bob Thornton. Matter of fact, we all called each other when we saw it. We're like, "It's Jim. He's come back to life." So Jim was this genius consultant that was knocking around Franklin Covey. He was attracted to Stephen Covey. And Jim had grown, not only had he been sort of an oil total quality guy, he was a serious student of Deming and Duran and the early quality principles. And so that was sort of embedded, and he had a very loose outline. The disciplines weren't the same. And then a business partner of mine, Mark Josie, and I, we watched the work that he did. And his consulting work had huge impact. So we brought him to Atlanta for 2 years, and my job for 2 years was to sort of deconstruct what he did almost at a subconscious level. You ever heard the term subconscious competency?
Yeah.
He had this gift for taking high-level strategic ideas and getting them to be meaningful to people at the front line of the organization. He was very loyal to the frontline worker. I remember him yelling at a CEO one day. I was petrified, but he was yelling at the CEO because the CEO couldn't tell him the value of the strategy. And he's like, "You're asking these people to change, and you can't tell me why." And I was like, "I'm going to lose this account, Jim." So Jim passed away about 4 years before the book was finished. And so, and it's funny, I have, he's known as the only mean consultant at Franklin Covey. We have this brand of being really, really nice. And Jim would tell me to shut up in front of my own clients, and I would. And he worked for me, and I would shut up. And Michael, I have this reoccurring dream where I'm talking to Jim, and somehow I know he's passed on, but I'm still talking to him. And I'm telling him about how the work that he gave birth to has had this impact all over the place. And then I wake up and I realize it wasn't a spiritual manifestation. And I know it wasn't a spiritual manifestation because he's nice to me in the dream. And so I'm pretty sure that wasn't Jim.
Nice.
That like you have to have something to work off of.
Right.
And Jim had some of these core ideas, and then we just processed. So that people wanted us, like Franklin Covey wanted us to write a book in 2004. We didn't write that book till 2012.
That's right.
And Stephen Covey was kind of the model. 7 Habits had a decade to germinate and create examples and get refined. And that's really what we did. And so it was 8 or 9 years of just trial and error, not only on the methodology, but on how to implement it. And then it was like watching a reaction, because we'd watch the byproducts of what would happen when people felt like they were winning, when they felt like they were making a difference. More importantly, when they felt like they were influencing the bet. And it's real work. It wasn't philosophical. We made a rule that we wouldn't sell this in the form of a training program, that clients, this is the only reason we have a book, clients had to do it. They weren't allowed to just teach it. And we took a multi-million-dollar training product off the market. The one time I convinced our CEO, because we wanted to see it. We wanted to see it in action. So it created a higher barrier to entry of people that were trying it, but it was only tried by people that wanted to do it.
That's amazing, because it's easy with any training program, even if it's really good, to kind of hide behind it sometimes. But in fact, I find CEOs in particular will hide behind the program. We're doing this. Look at us. We're great.
Yeah, right.
And it doesn't make a difference. It feels good. Gives you something to talk about, but doesn't make anything. And I think that's what I really like about 40X is that it's about changing. It's about something physical. Like you said, people want to win, right? I mean, the best people who've ever worked for me, my direct reports, are the ones like, I want to win. I want to do great work. I want to change, do something.
And part of that too, Michael, is they understand aspects of the work that management doesn't understand. This is what drove Stuart. Edwards Deming said that, I love this quote, people within 12 feet of the work are the ones that really understand cause and effect relationships. They can't always win the argument with you, but if they don't like it, you better pause, because they can sense that they understand the cause and effect relationships.
I love it. That's right. Because so many times, I'm sure I've told this story before on an earlier podcast. I find particularly executives. It was this one executive, and it was retail for sunglasses. I'll leave it at that. And one day I'm asking him, I said, "Can you tell me what the sales cycle looks like when somebody sells a pair of sunglasses at one of these kiosks?" And he starts telling me this story, and I'm like, "Are you telling me that because that's how it really works, or do you kind of picture it that way in your mind?" And his response to his credit was, "That's why I kind of picture it in my mind."
I can't believe you asked it. That's great. That's wonderful.
Crazy though.
Yeah. At least he was honest.
So you're getting to it. Okay, so listen, folks, you got to check out this book for sure, and check out Chris, any of his videos online. Can you kind of give us a quick? I know it's hard to do it; it's your baby, but kind of a summary of 40X for us.
All right, so I'm going to hit it really light, and then if you want to push on any of these, you can.
Yeah, right on.
All right. So before let's describe the landscape, and then I'll give you the disciplines. All right.
There you go.
So we'll start. Well, before we think of the disciplines as practices around what you do, but let's pull in Elon Musk and let's do first principles.
Okay.
Try this on. All right.
Yeah.
So there's a general restraining force I want to start with that is always in the way of execution, even if you can't see it. And there's a great expression that fish are often the last to discover water. Why? Because they're in it. It's everywhere, and it's always been there. Well, same thing's true with execution. The barrier, and it's so prevalent we don't see it, the barrier is actually the day job. The enormous amount of immediate and urgent energy required to just keep the doors open, to just keep things running, to just get to Friday without somebody yelling at me is so immediate that even if everybody says, "That's a great idea, I'm on board, boss," yes, weeks are going by and we're not making any progress. So we named this thing and we call it the Whirlwind. And it's this incredible amount of energy just to keep your nose above water as an operating business.
Right.
And when you explain this to people, you instantly gain credibility, because they're like, "All right, thank you for acknowledging that. Thank you for realizing we're not launching strategy in a vacuum. We're already." What's the line from As Good as It Gets?
Sell crazy someplace else. We're all stocked up here.
Jack Nicholson has that great line.
That's right.
Well, but somehow when you acknowledge that they're already up to their eyeballs and crazy. Okay, so that whirlwind
Feels good. Yes.
And just think of it like this, Michael. When something really important clashes with something urgent in the moment, which one wins? And urgency always trumps importance in the moment. Yeah. And that's why no leader gets a pass on this. All right. So that's the restraining force. The drivers have to do, getting through this has to do with putting disproportionate focus against what really matters and reducing ambiguity. So if you just kind of, what do I mean by reducing ambiguity? I mean, it's got to make sense at the front line.
Yeah.
Right. You can narrow focus and really define a clear focus and yet not have people be able to translate that to something that's meaningful or more importantly, something that they can influence. All right, so here are the disciplines. So that's the context.
Okay, well, let me hold you right there. I want to unpack a few things because this is so good. So when you say urgency generally always wins, is that just because of the energy around it? Because it's just so in your face and you just kind of get sucked into it? Is that why, would you say?
And you lie to yourself. So here's my analogy of this. Let's say you're the boss and you're having this epiphany moment and your head's thinking about the goal, not the day job. And you got this new way of explaining the strategy, and somebody walks past your door, and you can't resist. You're like, "Hey, you got a second? Come in here." And they timidly walk in your door, and you're doing a little dress rehearsal, right? You're trying it out, and you're explaining, and it's really sounding good to you, and you're getting this really interesting reaction from this person because this person is vehemently agreeing with you, while they are slowly, almost imperceptibly backing out of your office. Right? They're like, "That's great, boss. Key to our future. You keep thinking, chief. That's what I got it. But I love that. That's great." That person isn't lazy. They aren't stupid. Right. And they aren't defiant. They're busy. Right. When execution fails, it doesn't lose to lazy, stupid, and defiant. It loses to busy. And so that picture right there, I'm not arguing with you. That's great. Hey, Michael, tell you what, let me get caught up, and then I will help you out.
You're killing me.
It permeates every organization. As soon as you explain it to people, I do this thing at conferences where I have everybody turn to their neighbor and share an execution fail. Sometime they believed it was going to work this time, and it didn't. And it gets loud fast. People have no problems coming up with an execution fail. And then I ask them, I say, "Okay, I want an answer here. When it died, when this thing was finally dead and we didn't have a funeral for it, did it die all at once with a loud crash or slow suffocation?" And everybody, all in unison, they go, "Slow suffocation." And then they look around like, "Oh, everybody said the same thing." Right? And they realize, this thing this is what's killed. We're dying a slow death. So that's whirlwind.
It's so brilliant. And part of that, so when I always call it like fizzling out, right? And you'll see companies like, "We have this new grand initiative," and cue the band and hand out T-shirts. Yes. And it was created by somebody in a room in a vacuum, like, "Oh, look at, we have pillars and they all start with the same letter and there's elocution to it and it's awesome and you're going to love it. And we're going to spend $2 million on it." And then 6 months later, it fizzles out and nobody really wants to bring it up or talk about it because it's terribly embarrassing. But you just busted $2 million on it. Is that what it's kind of status quo a lot of times.
You just gave a perfect extreme example. All right. So I want to unpack a couple things that you just said.
Please.
It's funny because one of my sons called me and he was struggling with his work team. And I said, "Ben, I got a confession to make. Persuasion is overrated." He said, "Dad, that's the only thing you're good at." I said, "I know, I'm not happy about this." In other words, selling the idea, being persuasive. You know who nails this? James Clear in Atomic Habits. If you read Atomic Habits, I wish we'd said this. James Clear has this great little quote where he says, "We do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems." So Michael, all that energy that's created right at the beginning, that's nothing to do with the viability. We always think that, if we could just convince them, if I can just, matter of fact, the great execution fail is this. If I could just convince these people how important this is, I know they would do it.
They will embrace it and love it and call it George. And
2 hours later, they'll forget you were ever talking.
It's true. It's crazy. I've seen it, particularly with marketing people. Not to pick on marketing people, but I don't mind. They'll spend all this time the presentation. The presentation looks great, and I'm like, it's so not relevant to the people actually doing the work. But there is so much time wasted and money wasted on this. And
if we can just
we
convince them. We spend all our time convincing people.
Yes.
And they say, there's you have to over communicate by a factor of 10. Well, the problem's not communication. It's something else.
I love it. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. All right, keep going. All right, tell us about the disciplines.
Let's change the frame. Okay.
Yeah.
So the frame is what are the disciplines for? The disciplines are not the 4 disciplines of how you run your business. You know how to run your business. The 4 disciplines are, how do I get the next thing through the wall? We're making a strategic pivot. We've got to execute. Everybody's agreeing with me. Nobody's doing anything. We haven't made any progress on this at all. And it's like an organ transplant. What are they afraid of? They're always afraid of rejection. Well, some cultures are really good at rejection. A lot of cultures are good at rejecting the new thing. So there's some strategic imperative. We're not getting through the whirlwind. All right. So here are the disciplines. The first one is called focus on the wildly important. And all that means is for the organization to create clear delineation between what's day job, what's the part of the operation we have to maintain. And if we ignore that, that'll kill us faster.
Right.
So even though I'm talking about it like a barrier, it's actually keeping us alive. So what's whirlwind and what is the goal? Sometimes we call it a WIG or a wildly important goal. Sometimes we call it a breakthrough. But what's the thing? And I love this analogy. What's the thing that's going to get intensive care?
Wow.
I was given this analogy by a hospital, actually. You get it, right? And they said, look, we call these goals, or we call this category, we call this intensive care for a couple of reasons. The first is that there's a lot of important medicine happening outside of intensive care. Oncology, orthopedics, right? Imaging, labor and delivery, right? But if you're in intensive care, it's because you need intensive care, right? So the 2 things we get people thinking about are, okay, we got to get something through the whirlwind. It's got to go to intensive care. So what has to go to intensive care? And then secondly, what does intensive care look like? All right. So discipline 1 is really creating that delineation, both at the leadership level, but most importantly at the front line. And the formula we use for frontline teams, and this is very closely connected to where you want to go, which is human engagement. Right. The formula is whirlwind plus 1. So the whirlwind will dominate 80% of what people are doing. And they think that's all they have time for. It's that old Drucker expression that work will always fill the allotted space it is given.
Right.
It behaves like a gas, but you can kind of push against it. So in addition to the day job, what's the one achievable outcome that's going to have the biggest impact organizationally and strategically? And they get a say in this. Like in the book, we get into ways that you create a dialogue. Leaders maintain the ability to veto, but try very hard not to dictate, because you gain so much leverage when people are able to say, look, the one thing we can bring to the table that'll have the biggest impact on what you're trying to do is this. And you go, I wouldn't have thought of that, but you're absolutely right. Right? So we try to create some pull. So discipline 1 is all about pulling that critical objective, and only 1 per work team. This is the capacitor. 2 and it breaks. Wow. And I'm not saying people only do 1 thing. They're doing 20 things in the whirlwind, but they only have 1 intensive care patient.
I love it, because so many companies, they'll go through their annual business plan and they'll have 147 initiatives. And you're like, good luck. And then when you ask them to calendarize them, they front load them in the first quarter of the year.
And then no one ever looks at the binder again.
Never again.
Right. And just because you can measure something doesn't mean it needs to be a goal. Just because I'm going to say it again. Just because you can measure something doesn't mean it needs to be a goal. And everybody's like, I know that. I just keep doing it. So what do we have to sustain, and what do we have to blow the doors off of? And that plus 1, think of, if you're an organizational leader, think of that like currency. And then ask yourself the question, how would I spend that currency? If every frontline team could give me a deliverable, would I spend it all on this new quality initiative? No, I wouldn't. I might spend half of it with these teams on that. But then there's this new over the horizon product development cycle that we've got to get these products adopted in the marketplace. And these 3 teams I want focused. Like, how would you spend that currency? So discipline 1 is all about creating delineation between all the work that you're doing to survive and what is going to get intensive care.
So let me interrupt you on that one, because that's tough, right? I used to do something about a millionth as good. Unfortunately, I used to chip exercises when I used to do annual planning. I'm like, what are you going to bet it on? Clearly, all these things are good, but
Yes.
what are you betting on?
We use that
what's the
same
most
language,
important thing?
Michael.
But how do you?
it's that.
But that's a big different the way people have approaches for as long as I've been around. So how do you kind of unhinge that habit?
Yeah. So we have this simple model. Scott Field came up with this, and we've used it. We call it the strat map. And so what we have a leader do is they put sort of a high level box that just sort of represents all the work they have to do. And it's complex, and execution does not like complexity. The two best friends of good execution are simplicity and transparency. So the first thing we do before we've defined what our wildly important goals are is we break that box into 3 categories. The one on my left, I don't know how you're seeing me, we call stroke of the pen. And that's all the elements of the plan that can be accomplished with money authority because we said so. We're gonna green light that acquisition. We're gonna hire that person. We're gonna change that policy. We're gonna introduce that new comp plan. These are a series of bets, but they're bets that don't represent an execution challenge. They only represent a strategic challenge. Why don't they represent an execution challenge? Because they're gonna happen. There's no, right? An execution challenge is if you don't know if it's gonna happen. These are all gonna happen because we said so. We got the money and the authority. All right, okay, so I just depopulated that big box. On the other side, I'll leave the one in the middle open for a second. On the other side, we have the whirlwind. We have all the elements of the big plan that can be accomplished within the way we're already working. That can be accomplished within the inertia that the organization already has, right? That's where all your KPIs live. This is where all the sort of balanced scorecard metrics live. So we start separating all the elements of the plan between what can be done today and what's going to need money and authority. And then we find, and this is the point, there's a few things that we realize can't be accomplished with stroke of the pen. I can't buy it. I can't buy it. Right? I can't mandate it. Oh, and it's not happening today, no matter how much we talk about it. This provides we're not asking what's most important. Like in the airline industry, airline safety lives in the whirlwind and needs to live in the whirlwind. It represents most of what they do. Yeah. If it ever makes its way, right. Or so you can see as we break it down, well, what? The middle column is called breakthrough. And this is something, and this is what you look at now for choosing. And we needed this lens to help leaders sort of say, okay, there are 3 candidates. Which one are we going to choose? And everything in this middle category, it requires disproportionate effort. It requires a change in behavior. And it requires hearts and minds. Stephen Covey famously said, you can buy a person's back and you can buy their time, but a human being only volunteers their heart and their mind.
Right.
So we got to play by different rules in this middle category. So that's a long answer. Sorry, to a very short question.
It's brilliant.
Of how do you help people pick it? Because they want to pick everything.
They want to pick. There's an interesting analogy when I used to work with like competency sets, right? And let's make 5 or 7.
I did
and all of a sudden you'd be like, well, what about being a good listener? That's important too. Okay, now we have 8. What about this? Well, we have 9. And you're like, no, man, it got to be like,
now
hey, man, what are the
nothing.
1 or 2 things are we betting on? I'm sorry?
Now we have nothing, because if everything's important.
Yes, but you got this really cool sheet with icons on it and really fun definitions and means nothing. I love it. All right, brilliant. All right.
So discipline 1 is all about helping at a team level, at a very frontline level, everybody to know, hey, this is day job. This is the breakthrough. Okay, discipline 2 is a bit of a pivot. So discipline 2 says act on the lead measures. And what we're trying to do with discipline 2 is solve just one question. How do we make that goal a winnable game? All right. How do we make it achievable? And it hinges on one question. Now, the answer has to do with these lead measures. Lead measures have 2 characteristics. And if you meet these 2 characteristics, by definition, you have a winnable game. Lead measures, and by the way, if you want a quick example in your brain on lead measures, if weight loss is the goal, if it's the lag measure, the goal, the lead measures are diet and exercise. If good grades for your kid are the lag measure or the goal, homework average, number of hours a kid spends studying, those are the leads. Here are the 2 characteristics. They have to be predictive of the outcome. That's the part everybody gets. So if I do these, it's an if then. Use the word bet, Michael. That's perfect. If I do these, I get this, right? The second characteristic, these two metrics or whatever you have, they have to be directly influenceable by the team. So they have to be predictive of outcome, but they all have to be influenceable. And it's like a little puzzle people have to solve. The way we implement this is we give teams a list of 7 or 8 possibilities and pick the 2 that are both predictive and influenceable. So quick bad example. If I was a farmer and my goal, my lag measure was to increase the crop yield of a particular crop, my lead measure could not be more natural rainfall, even if natural rainfall was the most predictive indicator.
Right.
It's not, I can't influence that. So it only meets predictive. It doesn't meet influenceable. So this is why the book sold. People are hungry for real leverage. So once you've broken the goal down, how do you give human beings that affect the work, not only the ability to hit it, but let them choose? It took us 10 years, Michael, before we gave it lip service, before we really started letting teams decide, you make the bet. Which 2?
I tell you, without being too dramatic, but I am Italian, so it comes out. When you said hungry for real leverage, I mean, whew, right there, right? Because people want to come in. They want to see a direct line, right, of their impact. They don't want to hope for it. They don't want to be relying on anybody else. Right. And, or they don't, or you just come to work. I hope I did something good today. They want to see that direct line. They're hungry for that real leverage, man. That's powerful.
All right. So I got to tell you, you'll love this. So the whole time we're doing trial and error on the 4 disciplines, that we got really serious in about 2003. I had an associate who ran our offices in the Nordic region out of Denmark. And his name's Karsten. To this day, he's a dear friend. And we even had him come for a year and work in the US. And Karsten understood something better than we did. He understood that the final decision on the lead measures had to come from the team. Yeah. And he couldn't get it through our heads. And finally, he said it this way. He said, I won't use his Danish accent, but he said, if the boss decides instead of the team and the lead measures don't produce the result, because you never really know. Every lead measure is a guess. It's a bet.
Right.
He says, if the lead measures don't work, the team's just going to say, boss, the lead measures don't work. Yeah. But if the team came up with them and they don't work, the team will change them. The team will keep iterating. It's a great expression that all innovation comes from trial and error. The team will come back and say, hey, look, this didn't work, but we saw something. We think we know what it is. We've been at this 7 weeks now. We want to change our lead measure. Now,
so
they don't get to create them. That's not even an option in their brain.
Right. So they break the code. They figure it out.
They're the heroes of the story.
They're the heroes of the story. You're killing me. I love it.
Right. Oh, and then we would do these reviews where not too long, like 4 to 6 months later, before they'd hit their goals, we'd have senior executives. We had the governor of the state of Georgia, Sonny Perdue. He later became Department of Education secretary. We had Bill Marriott himself go down to review sessions with frontline teams that are doing this. So we drop like 14 levels of management.
Wow.
And put these senior execs in the room with these people that are doing frontline work. And the top level executives were smart enough to know they know more than you do. And so we get top line executives going, go back. Tell me again why you chose that lead measure. They were looking, what you said, Michael, they were looking for the leverage points. And They were getting a bird's eye view. And the framework provided a language for breaking this down and for giving frontline people the opportunity to teach senior leadership what they were learning.
It's amazing. It's amazing. In some ways, right? That's why everybody loved that show, Undercover Boss. Because every time that super brilliant undercover, they get there, they couldn't hack it. They couldn't hack down the front lines of it all.
Right. It was that same, and it was funny because the management layers that would get in the room that were in between, they were superfluous in these meetings. It was it was the top level management talking to frontline. They're like, wow. I don't care what the regional VP has to say. Go back. Tell me again about that lead measure. That I didn't expect you to say that. Okay, so discipline 1 and discipline 2, right? Everybody got it right. Discipline 1's all about the targets. Discipline 2's all about the levers.
Yes.
And it's highly involved. Now, all right, discipline 3 and 4, I can do really quick. Discipline 3 is create a scoreboard. Create a compelling scoreboard. And it's like a scoreboard at a game. It's a player scoreboard, not a coach's scoreboard. If you don't, this thing gets forgotten about in a week.
Sure.
So it's got to go live, game on. And discipline 4, very quickly, is that anybody that's part of a scoreboard team meets every week, and it's like a huddle. It's a short meeting, and everybody's got to come up with 1 or 2 things they're going to commit to do that increases the odds of us hitting our lead measure. So if that lead measure is really something I can pull, if it's a lever I can move, I got to think of something this week. I got Marty and Sue are new on shift 1, and I've got to train Marty on the redo process for processing errors. That's my commitment. And you've heard of just-in-time inventory. We call this just-in-time strategic planning. It's done very close to the front line. Oh, and it's a pull. It's not a push. So the rule is the boss is not allowed to give commitments in this meeting. Now they can instruct and they can be bosses all week long, but in this meeting, the commitments have to come from the team. And sometimes the team members, they don't want this. They're like, I don't get this. Why don't you just tell me what you want me to do? Like, we don't play that way. You got to give me one. Come on. And it's this great way to start reinforcing accountability and integrity in an organization. And they start to, well, would this help yeah, that would help. So it's only, it's small compared to the amount of whirlwind work. But think of it this way. The whirlwind sometimes is kind to us. Most of the time it's not. And it's hard to control. And it's hard for leaders who really want to engage people to create engagement wins in the whirlwind. But this other space is a perfect opportunity for creating, it's like, think of it like a little slice of sanity.
Yeah.
The whirlwind's going to throw a lot of things we can't control, but let's give people, and this kind of is our pivot to the other thing. We started before we knew it, Michael, we call it our happy accident. We started seeing spikes in engagement that were so significant that when we filmed the leaders about the results, the only reason they hired us was for the results. When anybody hired us for engagement, we had the hardest time to get them to talk about the results and not the engagement.
Huh. That's
got Tom Blackstock, the head of supply chain for Coca-Cola, brings us in because he heard that union employees were skipping lunch breaks. And what were we doing that would cause a union employee to skip a lunch break? And we didn't know. We had to go back. Like, what are they doing on that? Well, they had a scoreboard about number. There were 2 shifts. They were competing with each other. Like, we saw this engagement, but yet we couldn't figure out exactly what it was we were doing that was causing this really interesting reaction. Eventually, we connected the dots, but we couldn't right away. Jeez. So anything on that before we sort of pivot to engagement?
Yes, because I want to go deep into engagement. This is so fascinating to me because, as you know, the premise of work trauma is, the work trauma that we have to endure at a lot of companies that are maybe made by well-meaning people sometimes, maybe not all the time, and where it's the opposite of this, where it's about people. Hey, I like bloviating on my grand presentation because it makes me feel important and good. And gosh dang it, I have the title. People have to pay attention to me and laugh at my jokes when I present it. And I know better than the frontline workers. It's so counter conventional. So I'd imagine there has to be maybe the moment of truth for the executive, the CEO comes before they call you. Or there's got to be a moment of truth where they're like, nope, I got to let me go. I got to let my ego get out of this and do what's right for the business. How does that come about?
Yeah, there's a couple of things you're touching on.
Yeah.
Let me go here first, and we'll come back to senior leadership in a minute because you're touching a hot one there too. Okay. But sometimes we learn along the way. So one of the things that this is an antidote for, I think it's an antidote to the soul crusher. And I think the soul crusher is futility. Okay, why do I say that? The reason that this process had an impact on engagement, and we didn't know this until we saw Frederick Hertzberg's work from the 60s, is because it had this byproduct of creating progress and purpose. So all the things you know about customer satisfaction, put those in another bucket. People will work for you. Do I like my boss? Do I have a best friend at work? Do I have good work conditions? Yada, yada, yada. That's all the stuff they'll work for you for. But those things are about, do I like my job? When it comes to whether I'm into the work, it's about progress and purpose. People don't know this. People won't ask for this. They don't know it when it's missing. They don't know, right? When they experience it, it kind of changes us. Peter Senge in the book, Fifth Discipline, he bumped into this as well. And Senge said, some people will spend the rest of their lives trying to recreate that spirit.
Yeah.
People are deeply hungry for me. And when I say progress, I mean micro progress. I don't mean progress necessarily in the whole world. And I mean just on the goal. And purpose is small purpose. It's not building the cathedral. It's not part of some grand vision. It's, look, nobody but the people on this team understand what a big deal this is, but this is a big deal. And we're making progress. Yes, it's local. Yes, it's local. Thank you. It's not global. It's local progress, local purpose that rings the bell. And it was funny. I was having a conversation with ChatGPT, my new friend, today. And I asked it the question. I said, I think healthcare is an example of how limited global vision is at creating engagement. Yeah. Because, and I was just playing a hunch. I didn't know. I said, because there is nothing more noble than the healthcare prime directive of saving lives and reducing human suffering. And yet they're experiencing burnout by the buckets. So why would people burn out if they're part of such a ennobling vision? Because they can't see, because of futility, because of the soul crusher. And the antidote to the soul crusher is small progress and small purpose. Amabile and Kramer, The Power of Small Wins, they wrote about it. 3 Signs of a Miserable Job by Patrick Lencioni, he wrote about it. And ChatGPT just gave me 5 more sources and basically came back and said, I got lucky, right? What do they say? Even a blind squirrel finds a nut. ChatGPT is like, you just cited the classic example of why aspirational vision will get people in the front door, but it won't keep them.
No, it makes sense because I think, and I want to talk about this. We're going to take a break for finish up part 1 of this.
Yeah, we can really pivot to engagement on the next.
I want to go to this. I want to go deep in that because and tell me if this is too corny, too simplified. People, like you said, there are the basics, right? The Herzog stuff. That get you in the door. You better be paying people fairly. It better be generally good working. That's cost. That's price of admission, as I like to say.
Right.
But to tap into people, stop with I'm going to tap into your heart thing and actually give them something meaningful in their world, not your world, not the company's world, in their world, and let them produce and let them actually accomplish something. So immediately when you were saying that, I went to a very simple thing for me and for a lot of folks. When you mow your lawn, right? There was this weird feeling of accomplishment, and you're looking, I went to Diagonal Cut today. And
by the way, Michael had a lawn mowing business as a teenager, the Trans Am lawnmower.
True. I put the Trans Am Eagle on it.
Had the eagle painted on the front. He had a fantastic lawn. Keep going, Michael.
That's true. No, but I'm saying because it's part of the bigger picture is you're making your home nice, a great space for your family.
Yes.
But you could see what you did. I think part of it, you could see what you did in that moment. And say, it's not changing the world.
It's an unexpected high.
Yes, but it's tangible. I can look at my lawn and say, man, I did that.
Right.
And that's pretty cool.
It's a huge part. It's like, okay, if you can reduce ambiguity and you can narrow the focus, you can start to get through the whirlwind. But if you do those 2 things the right way and you really involve people, you get a third driver. You get engagement. You get people's heart. They will volunteer their hearts and their minds.
I love it. All right. So this is what we're going to do. This is going to wrap up part 1. And what we'll do, what I'd like to do for part 2, Chris, if you're up for it, is kind of going along this line. I want to apply your train of thought, the 4DX model, to some of the things that kind of, stick in my craw, my pet peeves with some of the businesses that cause the most work trauma. Because I think a lot of the work you do does the opposite. It creates good work, positive experiences, which is ultimately the goal of this. And sometimes you got to call out.
If it's done right. If it's not done right, it can do the very things you're talking about.
Right.
And we've also seen in the next chapter, or the next section, let's go back to which senior leadership attributes lend themselves to being successful with this type of an approach. Because we've gotten to observe this for a couple of decades. The patterns have really shown up.
I love it. We'll hit that right away. All right, this concludes part one with Chris McChesney, primary author of the 4 Disciplines of Execution, and all-around amazing person. So, Chris, thank you. Hold on one second. We'll come back to you in a moment. That concludes part one of our conversation with business execution expert and author of the book 4 Disciplines of Execution, Christopher McChesney, on the Work Trauma: How Corporations Really Work podcast. Please be sure to like and share and subscribe if you're up for it. And join us for part 2 of this conversation where things get really wild and wacky. Okay, kind of wild and wacky. Until then, we'll see you next time. Make every day great.